For millions of people, Jack and Rose never aged. They're still standing at the bow of that ship, still suspended in a moment that feels untouched by time. But Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet didn't stay there. While the world kept replaying their youth, their lives kept moving, through pressure, reinvention, and choices that quietly reshaped who they became. And if there's one person who understood early on what that kind of fame could do, it was Leonardo DiCaprio. Because being remembered as Jack Dawson was only the beginning of a much more complicated story. Think back for a second. When did you first watch Titanic? And were you more drawn to Jack or Rose? Released in 1997, Titanic didn't just become a film. It became a cultural moment that refused to fade. Decades later, its images still feel frozen in time, even if the people inside them are not. Billy Zane didn't just play Cal Hockley, he defined him. The polished arrogance, the quiet menace, the kind of control that never needed to raise its voice. For many viewers, he became the face of everything Jack wasn't. Wealth without warmth, power without empathy. And that's the strange thing about a performance that works too well. It can follow you longer than you expect. After Titanic, Zane continued working steadily, moving through film and television with consistency, but never again at that same cultural scale. There wasn't another role that reshaped how audiences saw him. In a way, Cal Hockley became both his most iconic achievement and a kind of ceiling. Because when a character is that memorable, it can be hard for people to let you be anything else. But there's also something quietly respectable in that path. While others chased reinvention, Zane seemed to accept a different rhythm. One less defined by headlines, more by longevity. Not every career explodes upward. Some settle into something quieter, more controlled. Almost like the man he once played. And that contrast between dominance on screen and a more understated reality sets up something Titanic returns to again and again. Because not every story from this film is about power or control. Some are about survival, resilience, and unexpected strength. Kathy Bates entered Titanic from a completely different place. By the time she stepped into the role of Molly Brown, she wasn't chasing recognition. She already had it. An Academy Award winner, a performer with depth and authority. She didn't need Titanic to define her. Instead, she used it to remind audiences of something she had always done better than most. Bring humanity into every frame. Her Molly Brown wasn't just comic relief or historical color. She was grounding. In a film filled with rigid class lines, she carried warmth, humor, and a kind of emotional honesty that cut through all of it. And off-screen, that same resilience became part of her real story too. Over the years, Bates continued to work with remarkable consistency, navigating both major roles and personal health challenges with a level of openness that never felt performative. She didn't disappear. She didn't fade. She endured. And that word matters. Because in an industry that often celebrates reinvention, there's something powerful about simply remaining, steadily, authentically, without needing to become someone else. If Billy Zane's story is about being remembered for a single image, Kathy Bates's is about never being reduced to one. But not everyone from Titanic had that kind of foundation going in. For some, the film wasn't a continuation. It was a moment. A brief window where they were part of something enormous, before life moved them somewhere much quieter. Danny Nucci, who played Fabrizio, was one of those faces you instantly recognize, even if the name doesn't come as quickly. As Jack's loyal friend, he represented something simple and pure in the film. Friendship without complication. Joy without calculation. And maybe that's why his presence lingers, even in smaller moments. After Titanic, Nucci continued acting, building a steady career across television and film. Roles came, projects moved forward, but nothing quite matched the scale of that one experience. And that's not unusual. For many actors, being part of something like Titanic isn't a launching point. It's a peak they carry with them. There's a quiet reality in that. Audiences tend to hold on to faces, not timelines. We remember Fabrizio laughing on the ship, but not necessarily the years that followed for the actor behind him. And yet, those years are where the real story lives. Not in the spotlight, but in the consistency of continuing, working, adapting. Because not every legacy is loud. Some are simply about being there, in a moment that mattered. And when you look across the cast, that idea starts to deepen. Titanic didn't just create stars, it created a kind of permanence. A version of these people that would never age, even as everything else did. There's something unusual about Titanic that goes beyond its success. It didn't just make its cast famous, it preserved them. For audiences, Jack and Rose aren't performances tied to a moment in history. They exist outside of time, untouched, unchanged, permanently suspended at their most radiant. But that kind of immortality comes with a quiet cost. Because while the film never ages, the people inside it do. Year by year, role by role, they move further away from the version the world refuses to let go of. And the gap between those two realities, the frozen image and the living person, only grows wider. For some, that becomes a kind of pressure. A need to break away, to prove they are more than a single moment. For others, it becomes something to carry. An identity shaped not just by what they did, but by how long the world keeps remembering it. Titanic turned its cast into something rare. Not just recognizable faces, but cultural memory. And cultural memory doesn't evolve. It holds on. Which is why what comes next matters more than what came before. Because the real story isn't how they became iconic, it's how they lived with it. Kate Winslet could have stayed exactly where the world first placed her. After Titanic, she wasn't just famous, she was defined. Rose wasn't just a role people admired, it became a kind of identity audiences expected her to carry forward. Romantic, luminous, untouchable. And for a moment, it would have been easy to accept that version of herself. But she didn't. Instead of leaning into the kind of roles that would repeat that image, Winslet moved in the opposite direction. Smaller films, more complicated characters, stories that were less about perfection and more about truth. It wasn't the fastest path to staying on top, but it was a deliberate one. Because the real risk after Titanic wasn't fading away. It was becoming trapped in something too polished to grow beyond. Over time, that choice reshaped everything. Performances became more layered, more grounded, less concerned with being liked and more focused on being real. And with each role, she quietly pushed further away from Rose. Not by rejecting it, but by refusing to let it be the final word. There's a kind of control in that. The ability to step outside the image the world hands you and decide, piece by piece, who you want to become instead. And that's what makes her journey different. Titanic may have introduced her to the world, but it didn't contain her. Because for some actors, the challenge isn't escaping fame, it's managing it. But for others, the experience is something else entirely. Something softer, more reflective, shaped not by what comes next, but by what came long before. Gloria Stuart's story doesn't move forward in a straight line. It circles back. Long before Titanic, she had already lived an entire career. A presence in Hollywood's earlier decades, a life shaped by a different era of filmmaking, a different rhythm of fame. And then, for years, she stepped away from that spotlight. Time passed. The industry changed. Her story, like many others, seemed to settle into quiet distance. Until Titanic brought it back. As the older Rose, Stuart didn't just return to the screen. She became the emotional anchor of the entire film, the memory, the voice that connected past and present. And in doing so, she experienced something rare. Recognition at a stage in life when most stories have already been told. There's something deeply human in that kind of return. Not as a reinvention, but as a continuation. A reminder that time doesn't always close doors. It sometimes brings them back in ways you couldn't predict. Her presence in Titanic feels almost symbolic now. A life that had already moved through decades, stepping into a story about memory, loss, and the passage of time, and becoming part of its legacy. And that idea of time folding back on itself leads directly to the person who may have felt its weight more than anyone else. Because while some actors worked to move beyond Titanic, Leonardo DiCaprio had to outgrow it. When Titanic was released, he didn't just become a star. He became something closer to a phenomenon. The kind of global attention that doesn't just elevate, it overwhelms. Suddenly, he wasn't just an actor making choices. He was Jack Dawson, fixed in the imagination of millions, expected to stay there. And that kind of attention can be limiting in ways that aren't always visible. Because the more the world sees you one way, the harder it becomes to be seen any other. For DiCaprio, the challenge wasn't finding work, it was finding space. Space to take risks, to fail, to evolve without being pulled back into the same image that made him famous in the first place. So he stepped away from it, slowly but deliberately. The roles that followed weren't accidents. They were decisions, projects that demanded more, characters that complicated his image, collaborations that pushed him into new territory. And over time, something shifted. Not suddenly, but steadily. The perception began to change, not from rejection of Jack Dawson, but from accumulation of everything that came after. That's what makes his trajectory so compelling. It wasn't about escaping Titanic. It was about building something strong enough that it no longer defined him completely. Because being remembered forever as a moment of youth might sound like a gift, but living beyond it, that's the real work. And in the end, DiCaprio didn't erase that moment. He expanded past it. Titanic gave us something rare, a moment so powerful it feels permanent. A love story that never grows older, a ship that never fully sinks in our memory, and faces that seem forever untouched by time. But the truth is, nothing in that film stayed still except the way we remember it. Because while we return to the same scenes, the same lines, the same emotions, the people inside those moments kept living. They changed, they struggled, they adapted. They moved forward in ways the film could never capture. And that's the quiet contrast at the heart of Titanic's legacy. We hold on to who they were. They had to become who they are. And maybe that's why the film still resonates. Not just because of what happened on that ship, but because it reminds us of something we all experience. Time doesn't pause. It carries everything forward, whether we're ready or not. But every once in a while, a story like Titanic lets us look back and feel like, just for a moment, it did. So now I'm curious. Out of everyone we revisited, whose journey stayed with you the most? And when you think about Titanic today, What does it mean to you now compared to the first time you saw it? If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.